Have you ever noticed how reality sometimes whispers to you before it speaks out loud? You're driving down a familiar road, or standing at the kitchen sink, hands in warm water, mind wandering. Out of nowhere, a person appears in your thoughts, someone you haven't spoken to in months, maybe years. And then it happens. Your phone lights up. A text, a call. Most people smile and say, "Oh, funny coincidence." But what if it wasn't a coincidence at all? What if moments like that are tiny cracks in the surface of reality? Moments where you briefly glimpse how deeply connected everything truly is. In modern physics, there's a phenomenon called quantum entanglement. And when you begin to understand it, not just with your intellect, but with your lived experience, you start to see your life differently. Not as a series of random events, but as a meaningful conversation between you and the universe. Let's slow this down for a moment. Quantum entanglement is the discovery that two particles, once connected, remain connected no matter how far apart they are. Change one, and the other responds instantly. Not seconds later, not after a delay. Instantly. As if distance doesn't exist. As if time itself pauses to let the connection speak first. When scientists first encountered this, it shattered their assumptions. Even Einstein struggled with it. The universe, it seemed, was far more intimate than anyone had imagined. And here's the quiet question that changes everything. If particles can be entangled, and you are made of particles, what does that say about you? It suggests something both humbling and liberating. You are not as separate as you've been taught to believe. You're not walking through life in a sealed container, isolated from everyone else. You are immersed in a shared field like a drop of water moving within a vast ocean. And in that ocean, there are currents. Some currents feel heavy: fear, scarcity, anxiety, constant vigilance. You can feel them when you turn on the news, or walk into a tense room, or scroll through endless opinions pulling at your nervous system. But there are other currents too: love, creativity, calm, trust, abundance. They're quieter, subtler, but just as real. Whether we realize it or not, we're always being carried by one of these currents. This is why emotions spread so quickly, why stress can fill a room without a word being spoken, why calm people have a way of calming others just by being present. Our nervous systems synchronize, our heart rhythms subtly align, our inner states leak into the field around us. This isn't poetry, it's biology, it's physics, it's lived experience. And it explains something most of us have felt but rarely named: why certain people drain us and others feel like home. Now here's where this becomes deeply personal. You are not only affected by the field, you are participating in it. Your beliefs are signals. Your emotional baseline is a broadcast. The way you silently talk to yourself, especially when no one is listening, that's a frequency. And when a frequency stabilizes, life reorganizes around it. Not because the universe is judging you, not because you deserve something good or bad, but because resonance is how reality moves. Think of it like tuning a radio. You don't force the station to change. You simply turn the dial and a different song appears. So many people believe they're stuck because they're trying to change their life from the outside. More effort, more control, more mental gymnastics. But reality doesn't respond to force. It responds to coherence. This is why positive thinking alone rarely works. You can repeat affirmations all day long, but if your body is still braced, tight, living in quiet survival mode, the signal hasn't changed. The universe doesn't answer words. It answers states of being. And survival mode, this is important, narrows perception. When fear dominates the field, people become easier to influence, easier to exhaust, easier to control. This has been understood and used for centuries. But here's the part no one can take from you. You don't have to stay in that current. You can shift not by fighting the old one, but by gently stepping into a new state. This is where quantum entanglement stops being an abstract idea and becomes a lived truth. When you relax your grip on life, when you soften the nervous system, when you stop trying to make things happen and instead allow yourself to be, You begin to resonate with a different stream of reality. Opportunities start showing up without struggle. The right conversations happen at the right time. Ideas seem to find you rather than the other way around. From the outside, it looks like luck. From the inside, it feels like alignment. You're not creating these moments by effort. You're noticing a deeper coordination already in motion. That moment when you think of someone and they call, you didn't cause it. You tuned into it. Time, as we experience it, can be misleading. What feels like first this happened, then that happened may actually be one single connection expressing itself in two places. That's why synchronicity feels so uncanny. It's not linear. It's holistic. Now, let me offer you a gentle truth that can change how you see your entire life. You are not trapped in one version of reality. You are tuned to one. There are versions of your life where everything feels like an uphill climb. And there are versions where things flow with surprising ease. The difference isn't fate, it's frequency. And frequency isn't something you chase, it's something you embody. This is why letting go is so powerful. Not giving up, but releasing the need to control every outcome. Like a river that stops trying to flow uphill and finally allows gravity to do its work. When you rest into trust, the field responds. When you choose presence over panic, the signal changes. And when the signal changes, the current carries you somewhere new. So if your life has felt heavy, if the same patterns keep repeating, if you've been trying so hard and getting so little back, maybe it's not because you're doing something wrong. Maybe it's because you've been trying to swim against a current that was never meant for you. Pause, breathe, soften. You don't need to force a new reality into existence. You only need to tune into the one that's already waiting for you. And once you do, life won't feel like a battle anymore. It will feel like a conversation, one you finally know how to listen to. 1. Human beings do not live in isolation. We exist inside a shared field. If particles can remain connected beyond space and time, and if your body, your thoughts, your memories, and even your emotions are made of those same particles, then the idea that you are a separate, self-contained individual begins to quietly fall apart. Not in a dramatic way, but in a gentle, almost relieving way. Like setting down a heavy bag you didn't realize you'd been carrying for years. You are not a sealed unit moving through a cold, indifferent universe. You are immersed in it, participating in it, shaped by it, and shaping it at the same time. I want you to imagine humanity not as billions of disconnected lives running side by side, but as a vast ocean, endlessly moving, endlessly communicating with itself. In this ocean, each human consciousness is like a single drop of water. From the perspective of the drop, it might feel small, vulnerable, separate. But from the perspective of the ocean, every drop belongs. Every drop contributes to the movement, the temperature, the tides. No drop is truly alone, and no drop moves independently of the whole. Within this ocean, there are currents. Some are slow and heavy, pulling downward, thick with fear, scarcity, and survival consciousness. You can feel these currents when you wake up already tense, when the news tightens your chest before you've even finished your coffee, when your thoughts loop around money worries, health fears, or the quiet sense that you have to struggle just to stay afloat. These currents are not personal failures. They are collective fields that many people have unknowingly entangled themselves with, often from a very young age, often simply by inheriting the emotional climate of their families, communities, or cultures. But there are other currents too, just as real, though often less loud. Currents of love that feel like ease in the body, currents of creativity that move like a gentle breeze through the mind, bringing ideas without effort. Currents of hope that don't deny difficulty but move through it with patience. Currents of abundance that feel less like excess and more like trust. The quiet knowing that life supports life when it is allowed to flow, whether you are aware of it or not. You are always drifting within one of these currents, and much of what you call your personal life is simply the experience of the current you are most attuned to. This is why emotions spread so easily, even without words. You walk into a room where tension has been building all day, and before anyone says a thing, your shoulders tighten, your breath becomes shallow, your mind starts racing. Nothing has happened to you personally, yet your nervous system has already begun to synchronize with the field around you, and the same is true in the opposite direction. Sit with someone who is grounded, present, and at ease in themselves, and something in you begins to soften, not because they are trying to change you, but because coherence invites coherence. Science now shows that when people spend time together, their heart rhythms can synchronize, their breathing patterns can align, and even their brainwaves can begin to move in similar rhythms. This is not mysticism, it is the natural behavior of interconnected systems. Your nervous system is constantly listening, constantly tuning, constantly adjusting to the signals it receives from the field around it. That field includes people, environments, media, memories, and even the emotional tone you habitually live in. This understanding can be unsettling at first, because it challenges the idea that you are fully in control of everything that happens inside you. But if you stay with it long enough, it becomes deeply compassionate. It explains why certain places drain you while others restore you, why some relationships feel exhausting even when nothing is wrong, and why healing sometimes begins not with fixing yourself, but with changing the field you spend your time in. Trauma, for example, is not only stored in individual memory, it is often held in relational and collective fields. Families can pass down fear, hypervigilance, or scarcity consciousness without ever speaking about it. Communities can normalize stress and call it productivity. Entire societies can become entangled with survival mode and mistake it for strength. And yet, in the same way, other qualities can be transmitted as well. A sense of worth, a capacity for trust, an orientation toward cooperation and creativity can also move through the field, quietly shaping lives. What is most important to understand here is that you are not merely being carried by these currents. You are also contributing to them. Your beliefs, especially the ones you rarely question, act like coordinates that tune you into certain streams of experience. Your emotional baseline, the feeling tone you return to when nothing in particular is happening, becomes a signal that the field responds to, not as reward or punishment, but as resonance. This is where many people misunderstand how reality works. They believe that effort, willpower, or constant mental control is what creates change. But effort belongs to the surface level of life. The deeper level responds to state. You do not have to push the ocean to move. You only need to stop resisting the current that is already there. When your inner state becomes more coherent, more settled, more honest, the field around you begins to reorganize in subtle but unmistakable ways. I say this not as a theory, but as someone who has lived on both sides of this truth. I know what it feels like to be entangled with fear, to wake up every day braced for impact, convinced that life is something to survive rather than something to participate in. I also know what it feels like when that grip begins to loosen, when you realize that much of what you thought was you was actually a field you had been swimming in for years. The relief that comes with that realization is profound, because it means you are not broken, and you never were. You were simply tuned to a current that kept reinforcing the same experiences. When you begin to understand that you live within a shared field, compassion naturally arises, both for yourself and for others. You stop taking everything so personally. You stop assuming that every struggle is a character flaw, and you begin to see change not as a battle to be won, but as a shift to be allowed. Like a river that stops trying to flow uphill and finally yields to gravity. Life begins to move with you rather than against you. You are always floating in the ocean of human experience. The question is not whether you are in the water, but which current you are allowing to carry you right now. And the most empowering truth is this: currents can change, not through force, but through awareness, presence, and the quiet courage to let go of what no longer serves you. 2. Quantum entanglement, where distance and time lose their meaning. Two particles are born together, in the same moment, from the same event, and from that instant on, they remain connected in a way that defies everything we were taught to believe about space, time, and separation. You can take one particle and place it in New York, the other in Tokyo, stretching them across oceans, continents, and cultures. And still, when you observe one, the other responds immediately. Not after a signal travels, not after time has passed. Instantly, as if distance were irrelevant, as if the universe itself were whispering, there was never a true separation here. For a long time, this discovery unsettled even the greatest scientific minds, because it challenged a deeply ingrained assumption that things must be close to influence each other, and that causes must come before effects in a neat, orderly line. Quantum entanglement quietly dissolves both of those assumptions. It tells us that connection can exist without proximity, and that time, at its deepest level, does not behave like the ticking clock on your wall. Now, I want you to stay with me here, not as a scientist, but as a human being who has lived long enough to notice that life often refuses to follow straight lines. You've probably had moments when something meaningful happened without a clear cause. Moments that didn't make logical sense, but felt undeniably real. A sudden insight that arrived fully formed, a meeting that changed your life, arranged by a chain of events so unlikely it still makes you shake your head. A deep knowing about something before you had any evidence to support it. These moments are often dismissed as luck, intuition, or coincidence. But they may be pointing to the same truth that quantum entanglement reveals in the laboratory. Reality is more interconnected and far less linear than we've been taught. When physicists first encountered entanglement, it seemed almost offensive to common sense. Einstein himself famously struggled with it, not because the data was weak, but because the implications were too strong. A universe where distance doesn't guarantee separation, and time doesn't strictly enforce order, is a universe that cannot be fully controlled or predicted. It is a universe that requires humility. And that humility is something we humans, especially when we're afraid, tend to resist. But if you look at your own life honestly, you'll see that linear time has never told the full story. You have been shaped by memories that are decades old but still alive in your body today. A single conversation from years ago can still influence how you trust, how you love, how you see yourself. In that sense, the past isn't behind you at all. It's happening now, echoing through your nervous system, shaping your reactions in real time, and, in moments of deep presence, deep connection, or deep pain, time often seems to stretch or disappear altogether. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like seconds. This alone should tell us that time is not as fixed or objective as we pretend it is. Quantum entanglement offers a language for understanding this without turning it into mysticism. It suggests that events can be correlated without being chained together in a simple cause and effect sequence. Two things can be part of the same underlying process, even if they appear separate on the surface. From this perspective, what you experience as before and after may simply be how your mind organizes something that, at a deeper level, is happening all at once. This is especially important when we talk about human connection. Think about the times you sensed something about someone you love before they told you, or when you felt a sudden heaviness and later learned that someone close to you was going through a crisis. These experiences don't require a mystical explanation. They require a relational one. If consciousness itself is part of a shared field, then emotional and informational signals don't need to travel through space the way physical objects do. They are already present, already available, waiting to be noticed. What quantum entanglement really challenges is the idea that you are an isolated observer looking out at a separate world. Instead, it points to a universe where the observer and the observed are woven together, where participation matters as much as measurement. This is not about magical thinking or denying physical reality. It is about recognizing that physical reality emerges from a deeper order, one that includes awareness, relationship, and context. When you understand this, you stop asking, "How could that possibly be connected?" and start asking, In what way were these things already part of the same story? That shift alone can change how you interpret your life. Instead of seeing yourself as someone constantly reacting to random events, you begin to sense that your experiences are coordinated at a level you don't consciously manage. This doesn't mean everything is predetermined. It means the field is responsive, dynamic, and deeply sensitive to state, distance. In this view, becomes less about physical space and more about resonance. Two people can live in the same house and be worlds apart, while others can be separated by thousands of miles and feel intimately close. What matters is not proximity, but alignment. The same is true for experiences. You can work tirelessly toward a goal and feel no closer to it, while at other times, a small inner shift brings results that feel disproportionate to the effort involved. This is not because effort is meaningless, but because effort alone does not determine outcome. Alignment does. Time, too, begins to feel different when you look at your life through this lens. You stop seeing healing as something that must take a certain number of years, and more as something that unfolds when the conditions are right. You realize that insight doesn't arrive gradually. It arrives when the system is ready to receive it. One moment, you are stuck in a pattern, repeating the same reactions, telling the same story about yourself. And then, something clicks. Not because time has passed, but because understanding has deepened. This is why forcing change so often backfires. When you try to push your life forward using the same state of consciousness that created the problem, you're still operating within the same entanglement. The field responds accordingly, reinforcing what is already familiar. True change tends to happen sideways, quietly, when you stop trying to outrun time and instead settle into presence. In that settling, the nervous system relaxes, perception widens, and new possibilities become visible. I've learned this the hard way. There were years when I believed that if I could just think harder, plan better, or discipline myself more, life would finally fall into place. What I didn't see then was that I was trying to solve everything from within a contracted state, one shaped by fear and control. Time felt like an enemy, always running out. Distance felt like a barrier, separating me from what I wanted. It was exhausting, and it never quite worked. What changed wasn't my circumstances at first, but my relationship to time and space themselves. I began to notice that when I slowed down, when I stopped rushing to the next moment, something softened. Solutions appeared that I hadn't been able to see before. Conversations unfolded naturally. Opportunities arrived without force. It felt less like making things happen and more like allowing things to meet me halfway. Quantum entanglement doesn't tell us that everything is connected in a vague, comforting way. It tells us that connection is fundamental, that separation is more appearance than reality. And when you take that seriously, you stop treating your life as a series of disconnected problems to be solved, and start experiencing it as a coherent process that is responding to you as much as you are responding to it. Distance does not mean disconnection. Time does not mean delay. At the deepest level, everything that matters is already in relationship. Your task is not to control that relationship, but to become aware of it, to move with it rather than against it, and to trust that reality is far more intimate and intelligent than it sometimes appears. When you truly understand this, patience becomes easier. Fear loses some of its grip, and life begins to feel less like a race against the clock and more like a conversation unfolding at exactly the pace it needs to. 3. You are not only reacting to life, you are broadcasting into it. Most people move through their days believing that life is something happening to them, as if they are standing still while events arrive one after another, demanding reactions, decisions, explanations, and emotional responses. From that perspective, it feels natural to think, when things change, I'll feel better. Or if life would just cooperate, I could finally relax. I lived that way for a long time, and I know how convincing that story can feel, especially when you've already been through loss. disappointment, or long stretches where nothing seemed to move no matter how hard you tried. But there comes a quiet moment, often after exhaustion has done its work, when you begin to notice something subtler. You start to see that your life doesn't only respond to what happens on the outside. It also seems to echo what has been living on the inside for a very long time. Not your surface thoughts, not the opinions you share with others, but the deeper emotional climate you wake up with each morning. The tone of the inner conversation that runs quietly beneath your awareness while you're driving, working, or lying awake at night. Your beliefs are not just ideas you hold, they are assumptions you live from, your emotional baseline. The feeling state you return to when nothing in particular is happening acts like a steady signal, and that inner dialogue, the one you rarely speak out loud, shapes how you interpret everything you see. Together, these form a kind of broadcast, not in a dramatic or mystical sense, but in a very practical one. They tell the field around you what you are available for, what feels familiar, what feels safe, and what feels threatening. When a signal remains unstable, when your inner state shifts constantly between hope and fear, trust and vigilance, the field responds inconsistently. Life feels chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes generous, and sometimes harsh for no apparent reason. But when a signal becomes stable, when a certain emotional tone settles in and becomes familiar to your nervous system, something interesting happens. The world around you begins to reorganize in subtle but persistent ways. You start encountering similar kinds of people, similar opportunities, similar challenges. Not because the universe is testing you, but because coherence attracts coherence. This is where many misunderstand the idea of creating reality. It's not about forcing positive thoughts on top of unexamined fear. It's not about pretending everything is fine when your body is still braced for impact. Reality doesn't respond to what you say you believe. It responds to what you consistently embody. And embodiment is slow, honest work. It involves listening to your reactions without judgment and noticing what they reveal about the state you're living in. For example, when something doesn't go your way, do you immediately feel tension in your chest? A tightening in your jaw? A familiar story rising that says, "Of course this would happen to me." That reaction is not caused by the event itself. It's a pattern that was already there, waiting for a reason to appear. The event simply activated a frequency that has been rehearsed many times before. In that moment, you are not reacting to life, you are broadcasting a state. And the field reflects it back in ways that confirm what feels known. This can sound discouraging at first, especially if you've spent years feeling trapped by circumstances you didn't choose. But there is something profoundly empowering hidden inside this understanding. If your life is responding to your broadcast, then change does not require you to fix every external problem. It requires you to become curious about the signal you are sending, and compassionate toward the reasons it developed in the first place. Most of our broadcasts were formed early, often in environments where we learned what was necessary to survive emotionally. If you grew up needing to stay alert, to anticipate disappointment, or to work hard for approval, your nervous system may have learned to live in a state of quiet tension. That tension can become so familiar that it feels like personality, when in fact, it is simply conditioning. Life then responds to that conditioning by presenting situations that require more vigilance, more effort, more control, reinforcing the belief that this is just how things are. I have seen this pattern again and again, both in my own life and in the lives of people who come to me exhausted and confused, wondering why the same themes keep repeating. The same relationship dynamics, the same financial stress, the same feeling of being almost, but not quite, supported. And the turning point is rarely a dramatic breakthrough. It is usually a gentle realization: this reaction isn't who I am, it's a state I've been living in. When that realization lands, even briefly, space opens up. You begin to see that your reactions are not commands you must obey, but signals you can listen to. You notice that beneath frustration there is often fear, and beneath fear there is a desire for safety, ease, or belonging. when you meet that desire directly, rather than trying to fix the surface problem, the broadcast begins to change naturally. This is why so much effort-based self-improvement fails. It tries to change the signal at the level of behavior, while leaving the underlying state untouched. But the field does not respond to effort alone. It responds to coherence. When your nervous system learns that it does not have to stay in survival mode, when your body begins to feel safe enough to soften, your emotional baseline shifts. And when that baseline shifts, the kinds of experiences you encounter begin to change as well. You may notice that people respond to you differently, not because you are acting differently, but because you are being differently. Conversations feel less strained. Opportunities arise without you having to chase them. Solutions appear where there once seemed to be only obstacles. This is not magic, and it is not wishful thinking. It is the natural consequence of a system responding to a new signal. It's important to say this clearly, especially for those who have been through real hardship. Broadcasting into life does not mean you are to blame for everything that has happened to you. It means that life is interactive, and that your inner state matters more than you were ever taught. Blame tightens the signal. Understanding softens it. Compassion recalibrates it. One of the most profound shifts you can make is to stop waiting for life to give you permission to feel at ease. Many people postpone peace, telling themselves they will relax once the situation improves, once the money is stable, once the relationship is secure, once the world calms down. But ease is not a reward at the end of the journey. It is a frequency that changes the journey itself. When you allow yourself moments of genuine presence, even in the middle of uncertainty, you are broadcasting something new. You are telling the field, I am available for a different way of relating. And the field listens. Not instantly, not always dramatically, but faithfully. It begins to offer experiences that match that availability. I learned this slowly, through trial and error, and through many moments of surrender that felt, at first, like failure. Letting go of control was terrifying, because control had once kept me safe. But over time, I saw that the more I trusted life to meet me where I was, the more life did exactly that. Not by removing all difficulty, but by giving me the inner resources to move through it without losing myself. You are not standing still, waiting for reality to change. You are in constant conversation with it. Every belief you hold repeatedly, every emotional state you return to, every story you quietly tell yourself about how life works, contributes to the signal you send. And life, in its own intelligent way, responds. The invitation here is simple, but not easy. It is to become aware of what you are broadcasting without trying to judge or fix it. To listen to your reactions as information rather than enemies. To recognize that change does not come from pushing harder, but from settling deeper into truth, safety, and presence. When you do that, even in small ways, you stop fighting the current. And when you stop fighting the current, life begins to carry you somewhere new. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally allowed yourself to tune into a different frequency. 4. Why you feel exhausted around some people, yet energized around others. There is a quiet truth most of us sense long before we ever have words for it. And that truth is this: not all exhaustion comes from what you do, and not all energy comes from rest. You can sleep 8 hours and still wake up heavy. And you can spend an entire afternoon with the right person and feel strangely restored, as if something inside you has been gently reset. For a long time, we explain this away as personality differences, chemistry, or mood. But those explanations never quite reach the core of the experience. What is actually happening runs deeper than psychology and far beneath conscious intention. Human beings are born to synchronize. This is not a metaphor, and it is not something we have to learn. It is built into the nervous system from the very beginning. An infant regulates its breathing, heart rate, and emotional state by attuning to the caregiver. Safety is learned through connection. Calm is borrowed before it is owned. This capacity never leaves us. It simply becomes more subtle as we grow older, hidden beneath layers of independence, identity, and self-protection. When people spend time together, their heart rhythms begin to align. Their breathing patterns subtly match. Their brain waves can move into similar frequencies. The nervous system is constantly scanning for cues, asking a silent question over and over again. Am I safe here? Or do I need to prepare for threat? That question is answered not by words, but by tone, posture, pace, presence, and emotional honesty. Long before your mind forms an opinion about someone, your body has already responded to their state. This is why certain environments feel heavy the moment you enter them. Nothing has happened yet. No conversation has begun. And still, your shoulders tense, your breath shortens, and your mind becomes restless. The field of that environment is carrying a frequency of stress, urgency, or suppression, and your nervous system, designed to synchronize, picks it up instantly. You are not weak for feeling this. You are perceptive. Your body is doing exactly what it evolved to do. And the opposite is just as true. There are people who make you feel like you can exhale for the first time all day. Around them, you don't have to perform or defend yourself. Your thoughts slow down. Your body feels heavier in the good way, grounded rather than burdened. This feeling of coming home is not romance or idealization. It is resonance. Your nervous system recognizes coherence in another system and begins to align with it. This is not about good people and bad people. It is about states. A person who drains you may not intend to. They may be deeply entangled with anxiety, unresolved grief, or survival consciousness, broadcasting a signal they themselves are not aware of. When you spend time with them, your system tries to synchronize, and if you are not well anchored in your own state, you may find yourself pulled into that same tension, leaving you exhausted without understanding why. For many years, I ignored this truth. I believed exhaustion was simply the cost of being responsible, kind, or loyal. I told myself that feeling drained was normal, that everyone felt this way, that I just needed to push through. But over time, that strategy eroded something essential. I began to confuse depletion with maturity and emotional labor with love. It wasn't until my body started speaking louder, through chronic fatigue and quiet resentment, that I was forced to listen more carefully. What I learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, is that constant exhaustion is often a sign of chronic misalignment. It is the nervous system's way of saying, this field is asking more than I can sustainably give. And the tragedy is that many people interpret that signal as a personal failing rather than a call for recalibration. The concept of entanglement helps us understand this without blame. When two systems interact repeatedly, they become linked. Emotional patterns begin to entrain. Stress synchronizes, calm synchronizes, fear spreads, safety spreads. This is why trauma can move through families and communities without ever being explicitly discussed, and why healing can do the same when someone is willing to hold a different state. You don't need to say anything to change a room. Your presence does it for you. If you are carrying urgency, the room tightens. If you are grounded, the room softens. This is not power in a dramatic sense. It is influence through coherence. And this is where responsibility enters the picture. Not as obligation, but as choice. When you understand that your energy is not infinite, and that your nervous system is always synchronizing with what it is exposed to, you begin to choose more carefully. You notice which conversations leave you clearer and which leave you confused. You notice which environments help you settle and which keep you on edge. This awareness is not selfish. It is self-respect. Many people, especially those who have spent their lives caretaking others, struggle with this realization. They worry that choosing environments and relationships that nourish them means abandoning others. But nourishment is not abandonment. It is maintenance. A depleted system cannot offer genuine presence. It can only offer effort. And effort is not the same as care. When you begin to prioritize your own regulation, something interesting happens. You become less reactive. You don't absorb other people's stress as easily. You can sit with someone who is anxious without becoming anxious yourself. This is not because you have built stronger walls. but because you have established a stable inner baseline. In systems language, you are no longer easily entrained by incoherence. This does not mean you never feel affected. It means you recover faster. You return to yourself more easily. You recognize that another person's state is information, not a command. And in doing so, you often become a stabilizing presence rather than a sponge. I've seen this shift transform relationships that once felt unbearable. When one person changes their internal state, the entire dynamic adjusts. Sometimes the relationship deepens and becomes more honest. Sometimes it naturally loosens, no longer sustained by shared tension. Either outcome is a form of truth. There is also a quiet grief that can arise here. The realization that some connections were built on shared survival rather than shared presence. Letting go of those connections, or relating to them differently, can feel like loss. And it is. But it is also liberation. You are not rejecting the person, you are releasing the pattern. The deeper truth is that energy is not something you manufacture. It is something you allow by removing unnecessary strain. When you stop forcing yourself to synchronize with fields that drain you, your natural vitality begins to return. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, like water finding its level. And when that happens, you may notice that you attract different people. Conversations feel less heavy. Laughter comes more easily. Silence feels comfortable rather than awkward. This is not because you have changed who you are. It is because you are finally allowing yourself to be who you were before constant synchronization with stress became normal. Entanglement explains why your life is not only shaped by what you think, but by what you spend time with. People, places, media, and habits all contribute to the field you live in. When you choose environments that support regulation, presence, and honesty, you are not escaping reality. You are participating in it more wisely. There is nothing mystical about feeling better in the right company. It is the nervous system recognizing safety and coherence. And there is nothing weak about needing space from what drains you. It is the intelligence of a system that wants to heal. You were not meant to carry every field you enter. You were meant to learn which ones are yours, which ones are not, and how to return to yourself when you've wandered too far into someone else's current. That is not avoidance. That is mastery. 5. The mind does not create reality. Your state of being does. For a long time, we were taught directly or indirectly that if we could just think the right thoughts, say the right affirmations, or maintain a positive attitude, our lives would eventually fall into place. And for a while, that idea feels hopeful. It gives the mind something to do, something to control, something to fix. But for many people, especially those who have sincerely tried and quietly failed, it eventually becomes exhausting. You repeat the words, you visualize the outcome, you tell yourself you believe, and yet, nothing truly changes. Or worse, things seem to resist even more strongly. What's missing from that picture is not effort or sincerity, it's understanding. Reality is not responding to your passing thoughts. It is responding to the state you live in, the one you return to when the effort stops. When the affirmations fade, when you are alone with yourself at the end of the day, that state is not located in your thinking mind alone. It lives in your body, in your nervous system, in the subtle but persistent tension or ease that colors your experience of being alive. You can think positively and still live in fear. You can speak words of abundance while your body remains braced for loss. You can tell yourself you are safe while your nervous system stays on high alert, scanning for danger. In those moments, the field does not hear your words. It responds to the underlying signal, the one being broadcast through your physiology, your posture, your breath, and your emotional baseline. This is not a failure of willpower. It is simply how living systems work. The mind is an incredible tool, but it is not the director of reality. It is more like a narrator, explaining and interpreting what is already unfolding. When we ask the mind to do the job of the body, we put it in an impossible position. We ask it to override years, sometimes decades, of conditioning with a few well-chosen phrases. And when that doesn't work, we blame ourselves rather than questioning the strategy. I learned this the slow way, through years of trying to outthink patterns that were deeply embedded in my nervous system. I could explain my behavior perfectly. I understood my trauma. I knew where my beliefs came from. And still, my body reacted the same way every time. Tight chest, shallow breath, a constant sense of urgency beneath everything. No amount of insight alone could dissolve that state. Because insight does not automatically equal safety. Safety is not an idea. It is a felt experience. Your state of being is the sum of how safe, supported, and regulated your system feels in the present moment. When that state is dominated by tension, vigilance, or fear, your perception narrows. You see fewer options. You interpret neutral events as threats. You prepare for disappointment before it arrives. And from that state, the world appears difficult, uncooperative, and demanding, not because it objectively is, but because you are meeting it from a contracted place. When the state shifts, perception shifts with it. You notice possibilities that were invisible before. You respond rather than react. You allow pauses where there used to be panic. And life, quite naturally, begins to meet you differently. This is not because you have forced reality to change, but because you are no longer asking it to interact with you through the lens of survival. The field responds to coherence, not performance. Coherence means your thoughts, emotions, and body are moving in the same direction. When you say you trust life, and your body actually feels safe enough to soften, that is coherence. When you say you are open to connection, and your nervous system is not braced for rejection, that is coherence. And coherence is a powerful signal. This is why so many people experience breakthroughs not when they finally figure it out, but when they stop trying so hard, after burnout, after surrender, after admitting they don't have the answers. In those moments, the system relaxes, control loosens, and in that relaxation, something new becomes possible. There is a deep intelligence in the body that we often overlook. It remembers what the mind tries to forget. It holds patterns of protection that once made sense, even if they now feel limiting. When you approach these patterns with force, they resist. When you approach them with patience and curiosity, they begin to unwind. This is not weakness. It is wisdom. Your state of being is shaped by what you repeatedly allow yourself to feel. Not the highs you chase, but the baseline you normalize. If stress, self-criticism, and urgency have become familiar, they will feel like home, even if they hurt. And life will continue to reflect that familiarity until something interrupts the pattern. That interruption rarely comes from thinking harder. It comes from learning how to settle the system, from slowing the breath, from allowing the shoulders to drop, from giving yourself permission to rest without earning it. These may seem like small, almost insignificant acts, but they send a very different signal to the field. When you embody ease, even briefly, you are not pretending that life has no challenges. You are signaling that you are capable of meeting those challenges without collapsing into fear. And that signal changes the quality of what shows up. You may still face difficulties, but they no longer feel like personal attacks. They feel like movements within a larger process that you are part of, not opposed to. I want to be clear here, because this is often misunderstood. Saying that your state of being shapes reality does not mean you are responsible for every hardship you've experienced. It does not mean trauma is your fault. It does not mean suffering is chosen. It means that within what has already happened, there is room to shift how life continues to unfold. Blame freezes the system. Compassion opens it. When you stop demanding that your mind fix everything, and instead begin to listen to what your body is telling you, a different kind of change becomes possible. You realize that peace is not something you think your way into. It is something you allow by removing what keeps you in constant defense. Over time, as your baseline state becomes calmer and more grounded, you may notice that life feels less adversarial, You are less reactive to setbacks. You recover faster from disappointment. You trust your timing more. And you begin to experience moments of quiet alignment, where things fall into place without force. This is not because you have mastered some technique. It is because you have come into relationship with yourself in a new way. You are no longer trying to create reality from the mind alone. You are allowing reality to respond to a state of being that is more honest, more regulated, and more whole. And in that honesty, something simple but profound becomes clear. You were never meant to think your way into a better life. You were meant to live your way into it. One regulated breath, one softened moment, one truthful pause at a time. 6. Those who seek to control have always understood this. There is an uncomfortable truth that becomes easier to face once you have lived long enough to see patterns repeat across generations, cultures, and personal histories. And that truth is this: fear has always been one of the most effective tools for shaping human behavior. Not because people are weak, but because fear pulls the nervous system into survival mode. And survival mode changes how reality is perceived. This is not a modern phenomenon. And it is not limited to any one group or ideology. It has been happening for centuries. Quietly, persistently, and often invisibly. When fear is introduced into the collective field, something very specific happens inside the human system. Attention narrows. The body prepares for threat. Breathing becomes shallow. Muscles tighten. The mind shifts from curiosity to vigilance. In this state, people are no longer oriented toward understanding or long-term wisdom. They are oriented toward immediate safety. This is not a moral failing. It is biology doing exactly what it evolved to do. But biology has consequences. When a person is living in survival consciousness, perception becomes restricted. They see fewer options. They hear less nuance. They are more likely to react than to reflect, more likely to defend than to inquire. In this state, quick answers feel safer than complex truths, and certainty feels more comforting than humility. The system prioritizes speed over depth, reaction over insight, and this makes people far easier to influence. This is why fear has been used so consistently throughout history, whether through threats, scarcity, division, or constant urgency. When people are afraid, they look outside themselves for direction. They cling to authority. They surrender inner discernment in exchange for the promise of protection. Again, this is not because they are unintelligent, but because fear temporarily shuts down access to higher-order thinking and deeper intuition. I want to be very clear here, because this topic can easily slide into blame or paranoia if it is not approached with care. Understanding manipulation is not about accusing others or feeding distrust. It is about recognizing a dynamic so you are no longer unconsciously participating in it. Awareness is not resistance. Awareness is freedom. When fear dominates the field, people become reactive. They respond quickly, often emotionally, without the space needed to integrate information or question assumptions. Wisdom requires spaciousness. Fear collapses space. And collapsed space is fertile ground for control, because it removes the pause where choice lives. This is why constant exposure to fear-based messaging, whether through media, social environments, or even personal relationships, can feel so draining over time. It keeps the nervous system in a state of low-grade emergency. Even when nothing is immediately wrong, the body remains prepared for impact. Over time, this state becomes normalized. People forget what it feels like to be truly at ease, and tension becomes mistaken for alertness. Stress for productivity, anxiety for responsibility. I have lived inside this field. Many of us have. It feels like always being on call, always braced, always one step away from something going wrong. In that state, rest feels irresponsible, and peace feels naive. You tell yourself you'll relax once things calm down, once the problem is solved, once the world becomes safer, but the world never becomes safe enough for a nervous system that has learned to survive rather than to live. This is the quiet trap of survival consciousness. It convinces you that staying tense is necessary, even virtuous. And as long as you believe that, you remain entangled with the very current that exhausts you. What is rarely said out loud is that you do have a choice. Even when the world feels overwhelming, not a dramatic choice to overthrow systems or fight invisible enemies, but a subtle, deeply personal choice about where you place your attention and how you allow your body to live moment by moment. You cannot control the collective field, but you can decide whether you continue to feed it through your own state. Fear spreads quickly because nervous systems synchronize. One anxious person can unsettle a room. One calm person can do the opposite. This is not metaphorical. It is the natural behavior of interconnected systems. And this is where personal responsibility quietly returns, not as blame, but as agency. When you remain in survival mode, you amplify survival mode. When you choose regulation, presence, and grounded awareness, you introduce a different frequency into the field. You may not change the world overnight, but you change your experience of it. And that change ripples outward in ways you cannot fully predict. This is why the most radical act in a fear-driven culture is not rebellion, but regulation. To slow your breath when everything is urging you to panic, to question urgency when everything demands immediate reaction, to choose depth over speed, presence over outrage, understanding over certainty. These choices may seem small, but they are powerful because they restore access to your full intelligence. Higher intelligence does not disappear under fear. It becomes inaccessible. When the nervous system feels safe enough, perception widens. You begin to see patterns rather than isolated events. You can hold complexity without collapsing into confusion. You can disagree without dehumanizing. You can act without being driven by panic. This is the state from which genuine wisdom arises. Those who rely on fear understand this. Even if they do not articulate it in these terms, they understand that a regulated population is harder to manipulate. Because regulated people are not easily rushed. They do not need constant reassurance. They trust their internal signals. And that trust is quietly subversive in systems built on urgency and dependence. The good news, and this matters deeply, is that you are not trapped in a fear-based current unless you continue to stay there. Leaving it does not require confrontation. It requires withdrawal of participation. It requires noticing when your body tightens and choosing, again and again, to soften where you can. It requires stepping back from sources that keep you perpetually alarmed and giving yourself permission to protect your nervous system without guilt. This does not mean becoming indifferent or disengaged from the world. It means engaging from a place of steadiness rather than reactivity. You can care deeply without being consumed. You can stay informed without being overwhelmed. You can act without being driven by fear. I have found that the more I step out of survival consciousness, the clearer everything becomes. Problems do not vanish, but they become more workable. Conversations become more honest. Choices feel less frantic. And perhaps most importantly, I stop feeling like life is something happening to me, something I must constantly defend against. Fear wants you to believe that staying tense is the price of staying safe. Presence teaches you that safety begins inside. When you anchor yourself in a regulated state, you reclaim your ability to choose how you respond. And that choice is something no external force can take from you. You do not need to fight the current to leave it. You simply need to stop swimming in the direction it pulls you. Turn toward breath. Turn toward awareness. Turn toward what grounds you. Over time, gently and inevitably, you find yourself carried by a different stream. One that supports clarity rather than confusion, connection rather than division, and life rather than mere survival. And once you experience that shift, even briefly, you understand something essential. The greatest freedom you will ever know is not found in controlling the world, but in no longer allowing fear to control you. 7. You did not create the call. You recognized a deeper coordination. There is a subtle but important distinction that changes how you understand your relationship with reality. And that distinction is this: you are not forcing events into existence. And you are not pulling strings behind the scenes to make things happen. When you think of someone and they call you, you are not manufacturing the moment. You are noticing a coordination that was already present at a level deeper than linear cause and effect. Most of us were taught to see life as a straight line. First this happens, then that happens, and the second thing must be caused by the first. This way of thinking feels safe because it is predictable. It gives the mind a sense of order. But lived experience has a way of quietly contradicting that model. There are moments in life that simply do not fit into neat sequences. Moments where the timing is too precise, the alignment too exact, to be explained as coincidence alone. When you think of someone and they call, it feels uncanny because the mind tries to trace a linear path. You ask yourself how it could be possible. You think, I was just thinking about them, but they must have decided to call before I even thought of them. The timeline does not add up, and that confusion is the clue. It tells you that the event is not best understood through time as we usually experience it. Thoughts do not live inside the skull the way we often imagine. They are not isolated electrical sparks trapped in the brain. Thoughts are patterns, vibrations, movements of information within a larger field. When you think deeply of someone, especially with emotion, you are not just recalling a memory. You are tuning into a frequency. You are aligning your awareness with a specific pattern that exists beyond your individual mind. This is why certain thoughts feel charged while others pass through unnoticed. When a thought carries emotional weight, it has coherence. It stabilizes long enough to interact with the field. And when two people are connected through shared history, emotional resonance, or unresolved energy, that tuning can happen easily, even unconsciously. From this perspective, the phone call is not the result of your thought causing their action. It is the visible expression of a shared alignment that existed before either of you became aware of it. What looks like two separate events unfolding in time is actually one connection expressing itself in two places. This understanding requires a different relationship with time. Time, as we experience it, is a way the nervous system organizes perception. It helps us function. It helps us remember, plan, and coordinate. But it is not the full story. At a deeper level, reality behaves more like a field than a timeline. Information does not always travel from point A to point B. Sometimes it is simply accessed. You can see this in your own life if you look closely. There are insights that arrive whole, without a process. There are decisions you know are right before you can explain why. There are moments when you walk into a situation already sensing how it will unfold. These are not supernatural abilities. They are expressions of attunement. Your awareness is picking up on patterns that your conscious mind has not yet translated into language. I used to believe that these moments meant I was somehow controlling outcomes, that if I focused correctly, I could make things happen. Over time, that belief became a burden. It placed responsibility where it did not belong and turned natural alignment into pressure. What brought relief was realizing that awareness is receptive, not manipulative. You are not pulling reality toward you. You are meeting it where it already is. When you release the need to be the cause, you gain access to something far more reliable: participation. You are part of an intelligent system that is constantly coordinating itself. Your role is not to manage that intelligence, but to listen to it. And listening does not mean passivity. It means presence. This is why forcing outcomes often leads to frustration. When you try to impose linear will on a non-linear system, resistance arises. You push. Life pushes back. You plan. Reality detours. But when you relax into attunement, when you allow yourself to sense rather than control, movement becomes smoother. Things arrive at the right moment, not because you made them arrive, but because you were available to recognize them. This distinction also protects you from unnecessary guilt. If you believe you are constantly creating everything that happens, then every unwanted experience feels like a personal failure. But life is not a vending machine responding to perfect inputs. It is a living field responding to states, relationships, histories, and collective dynamics. You influence it. Yes, but you do not command it. Understanding this brings humility, and humility brings peace. You stop trying to time everything perfectly. You stop blaming yourself for missed moments. You begin to trust that when something aligns, it aligns because the conditions were ready, not because you executed the correct mental strategy. There is a deep kindness in this view. It acknowledges your participation without burdening you with omnipotence. You are not powerless, and you are not all-powerful. You are relational, and relational systems move through coordination, not domination. When you think of someone and they call, the invitation is not to marvel at your ability to manifest, but to recognize the intimacy of connection. It is a reminder that you are not as separate as you sometimes feel, that your inner world and the outer world are in conversation, not competition. These moments are small, but they are meaningful. They soften the illusion of isolation. They suggest that beneath the surface of daily life, something is constantly weaving relationships together, adjusting timing, opening and closing pathways in response to readiness rather than force. The more you notice these moments without trying to control them, the more frequent they seem to become. Not because you are causing them, but because your awareness is refined. You are no longer dismissing coordination as coincidence. You are allowing yourself to feel the texture of reality as it actually is. This also changes how you approach desire. Instead of asking how to make something happen, you begin to ask how to align with it. You listen for whether an idea feels alive or forced. You notice whether effort feels expansive or constricting. Over time, you learn the difference between movement that is supported and movement that is driven by fear. In my own life, this shift has been the difference between exhaustion and ease. When I stopped trying to orchestrate every outcome and started paying attention to timing, relationships unfolded more naturally. Conversations happened when both people were ready. Opportunities arrived without chasing. And when something did not materialize, it no longer felt like failure. It felt like information. You begin to see that life is not withholding from you. It is coordinating with you. And coordination requires listening as much as it requires action. So the next time you think of someone and they reach out, let it be a gentle reminder rather than a mystery to solve. Let it tell you that connection is real, that timing is intelligent, and that awareness is enough. You do not need to pull reality toward you. You only need to be present enough to recognize when you and reality are already moving together. That recognition is not dramatic. It is quiet. It feels like a soft click into place, a sense of course, rather than surprise. And once you experience it that way, you stop chasing moments and start inhabiting them. You realize that life has been speaking to you all along, not through commands or demands, but through coordination, waiting patiently for you to notice. 8. Letting go of control is the fastest way to change the current you are in. There is a moment in most lives when effort quietly stops working, not because you have failed, but because effort has reached the limit of what it can do. You try harder to stay positive. You discipline your thoughts. You manage your reactions. You read. You practice. You repeat. And yet, beneath all of that, something remains tense, guarded, and tired. It is in that moment, often misunderstood as defeat, that a deeper truth begins to reveal itself. Reality does not shift through force, and it does not respond well to pressure. Even when that pressure is dressed up as optimism or self-improvement, you do not need to force yourself to be positive. You do not need to strain your mind into constant affirmation. You do not need to manifest your way out of tension by overriding what your body is honestly feeling. In fact, the more you try to control reality from a contracted state, the more you remain entangled with the very current you are trying to escape. Control feels like safety when you have lived through uncertainty, but it is a fragile safety, one that keeps the nervous system locked in vigilance rather than allowing it to rest. When control dominates, the nervous system stays in survival mode. It may look productive on the outside, but inside there is urgency, monitoring, and a quiet fear of things falling apart if you let go for even a moment. In that state, perception narrows. You focus on outcomes rather than process, on results rather than presence. Life becomes something to manage rather than something to participate in. And from that place, change is slow, heavy, and often exhausting. Letting go is often misunderstood as passivity or giving up, especially by those who have learned that effort equals worth. But letting go is not resignation. It is a shift in relationship. It is the moment you stop gripping the steering wheel so tightly and allow the road to support the movement forward. It is not that you stop caring. It is that you stop trying to control what cannot be controlled from the level you are operating at. When you let go of control, something very specific and very real happens inside the body. The nervous system receives a signal that the immediate threat has passed. Breathing deepens. Muscles soften. Attention widens. This shift from survival to safety is not philosophical. It is physiological. And only from this state of relative safety does the system regain access to its full intelligence. In survival mode, the brain prioritizes speed over wisdom. It reaches for familiar patterns. It reacts quickly, often defensively. In safety, a different kind of intelligence becomes available. You can reflect without collapsing. You can feel without being overwhelmed. You can respond rather than react. This is not because you have become better at thinking, but because your system is no longer hijacked by fear. This is why real transformation so often follows moments of surrender rather than moments of triumph. People describe breakthroughs not after they finally got it right, but after they stopped fighting, after burnout, after grief, after admitting they didn't know what to do next. In those moments, control loosens, not as a strategy, but as a necessity. And in that loosening, the system resets itself in ways that effort never could. I know how difficult this can be to accept, especially if control once kept you safe. For many of us, control was not a personality trait. It was a survival adaptation. It helped us navigate chaos, unpredictability, or emotional absence. It made sense at the time. But what once protected you can later imprison you if it becomes the only way you know how to relate to life. Letting go does not mean abandoning discernment or responsibility. It means releasing the belief that tension is required for things to work out. It means trusting that life has its own momentum, and that your role is not to push it forward, but to align with it. Alignment is quieter than control. It does not announce itself. It feels like relief. When you stop forcing positivity, something honest emerges. You allow yourself to feel what is actually present without immediately trying to fix it. This honesty is not indulgent. It is regulating. The body relaxes when it is allowed to tell the truth. And from that relaxation, new possibilities appear naturally, not as ideas to chase, but as options you can genuinely feel into. This is where the idea of allowing becomes central. Allowing is not doing nothing. It is creating space. It is stepping out of the way of the process that is already unfolding, like a river that flows more freely when obstacles are removed. Your life begins to move with less resistance when you stop trying to micromanage every bend. In a state of allowing, you may notice that timing improves. Conversations happen when they are ready to happen. Decisions feel clearer because they are not driven by panic. Opportunities arrive without you having to pursue them aggressively. This does not mean everything becomes easy, but it does mean that effort is no longer wasted fighting the current. One of the quiet miracles of letting go is how it restores trust. Not blind trust, but grounded trust rooted in experience. When you see that things can unfold without constant interference, you begin to believe in the intelligence of life again. You stop seeing uncertainty as an enemy and start seeing it as a space where new configurations can form. It is important to understand that letting go is not a one-time event. It is a practice. Control reasserts itself when fear arises, and fear will arise. The work is not to eliminate fear, but to notice when it is driving the system and gently choose a different response. Each time you soften instead of tighten, you reinforce safety. Each time you pause instead of panic, you deepen regulation. Over time, these moments accumulate, and your baseline state begins to shift. As your baseline shifts, so does the current you are in. This is not metaphorical. When your nervous system stabilizes in safety rather than survival, you naturally entrain to different fields. You notice different information. You attract different relationships. You respond to challenges differently. The outer changes follow the inner ones, not because you demanded them, but because you made room for them. I have found that the fastest changes in my life did not come from doing more, but from releasing what was no longer necessary. Releasing constant vigilance. Releasing the belief that struggle is required. Releasing the idea that rest must be earned. Each release felt risky at first, like stepping into unknown water. But each time, the water held me. Letting go does not mean you stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop sacrificing your nervous system to try to guarantee them. It means you trust that your well-being is not a bargaining chip you trade for future success. When you protect your state, you protect your capacity to respond wisely to whatever comes next. In a culture that glorifies effort and control, allowing can feel counterintuitive, even irresponsible. But when you look closely, you see that the most grounded, creative, and resilient people are not the ones who force life into submission. They are the ones who know when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to move forward and when to let the current carry them. Letting go is not weakness. It is discernment. It is recognizing that not everything requires your intervention, and that some things resolve themselves more gracefully when you stop interfering. It is understanding that your worth is not measured by how tightly you hold on, but by how honestly you can release. When you allow, you step out of survival and into participation. You stop bracing for impact and start trusting your ability to respond. And from that place, reality does not feel like something you must conquer. It feels like something you are moving with, moment by moment, breath by breath. Buong kong fai la tubo. Letting go is not giving up. It is giving permission. Permission for your body to rest. Permission for life to support you. Permission for change to happen in its own time and in its own way. And often, that permission is all that was ever missing. 9. Ideas do not need to be pushed. They find their own way. There is a quiet misunderstanding that causes many people unnecessary strain. And that misunderstanding is the belief that ideas must be forced into existence through constant effort, relentless planning, and visible struggle. We are taught, often very early, that if something matters to us, we must chase it, defend it, and prove our commitment through exhaustion. And while effort has its place, there comes a point where pushing an idea actually disconnects it from the very intelligence that could help it grow. An idea that is held with emotional clarity behaves very differently from an idea that is driven by urgency. Emotional clarity does not mean excitement or obsession. It means the idea feels clean inside you. It does not demand constant reassurance. It does not provoke anxiety about timing or outcome. It feels settled, almost quiet, as if it knows it belongs. When an idea reaches that state, it begins to organize reality around itself in ways that are often invisible at first. From the outside, this can look like luck. People meet the right person at the right time. A conversation opens a door that didn't exist the day before. A resource appears without being chased. Observers call it coincidence or good fortune. But from the inside, it feels different. It feels like recognition rather than surprise, like stepping into something that was already waiting. This is not because the idea is powerful in some mystical sense. It is because clarity creates coherence, and coherence allows entanglement to do what it naturally does. When an idea is coherent within you, it begins to resonate with people, environments, and opportunities that already exist within the same field of possibility. You are not creating those elements from nothing. You are aligning with a configuration that was already available. Many people sabotage this process without realizing it. The moment an idea appears, they rush to explain it, justify it, protect it, or monetize it. They pull it into the mind and begin interrogating it with fear-based questions. Will this work? What if I fail? What if I miss my chance? What if someone else does it first? In doing so, The emotional clarity is replaced by tension. The signal becomes noisy. The idea no longer rests in coherence. It becomes entangled with survival consciousness. When that happens, the idea starts to feel heavy. It requires constant motivation. It feels fragile, as if it might collapse if you stop pushing. This is often interpreted as lack of discipline or commitment, but it is more accurately a sign that the idea has been disconnected from its natural rhythm. I have lived both sides of this. I have pushed ideas until they drained the joy out of me, believing that persistence alone would carry them forward, and I have held ideas quietly, sometimes for months or years, without trying to make them real before they were ready. The difference in how life responded was unmistakable. When I pushed, obstacles multiplied. Resistance appeared everywhere. Every step felt like swimming upstream. When I allowed, connections emerged effortlessly. People reached out without prompting. Circumstances rearranged themselves in ways I could not have planned. It wasn't faster in the way urgency wants, but it was cleaner, more sustainable, and far less exhausting. This is the nature of entanglement. When an idea is held in a stable emotional state, it begins to interact with the field. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It simply resonates, and resonance is selective. It draws in what matches and ignores what does not. Over time, the right people notice. The right opportunities surface. The necessary resources appear, not because you hunted them down, but because you became visible to them within the field. It is important to understand that allowing an idea to find its way does not mean you do nothing. It means you listen more than you push. You pay attention to where energy flows easily and where it meets resistance. You follow curiosity rather than fear. You respond to invitations rather than forcing outcomes. This kind of movement feels different in the body. It feels supported rather than strained. One of the clearest signs that an idea is being forced is the constant need for validation. When you are pushing, you look outside yourself to confirm that you are on the right track. You need encouragement to keep going. You worry about perception. In contrast, when an idea is aligned, you feel a quiet confidence that does not require applause. You are willing to move slowly because you trust the process. This trust is not blind optimism. It is grounded in experience. You begin to notice patterns. You see that the most meaningful developments in your life did not come from frantic effort, but from moments when things aligned naturally. A job that came through a conversation rather than an application. A relationship that unfolded without chasing. A creative project that found its audience after you stopped trying to impress. The field is responsive, but it responds to state, not to pressure. When you are clear, present, and regulated, you become easier to find. People sense it, even if they cannot articulate why. They feel drawn to you, not because you are convincing, but because you are coherent. And coherence is attractive. It signals safety, stability, and authenticity. This is why ideas held in clarity tend to attract collaborators rather than competitors. The energy around them is not defensive, it is open. People feel invited rather than challenged. And that invitation creates networks that no amount of strategy could manufacture. There is also an important humility in this approach. You stop seeing yourself as the sole engine of creation and start seeing yourself as a participant in a larger intelligence. You recognize that you are not alone in bringing something into the world. Life is involved. Other people's readiness matters. Timing matters. Context matters. When you honor these factors, you work with reality instead of against it. This does not mean that every idea you hold will manifest. Some ideas are stepping stones. Some are teachers rather than destinations. Allowing them to find their way also means allowing them to leave if they no longer resonate. Pushing often keeps ideas alive long after they have served their purpose. Allowing lets them evolve or dissolve without bitterness. I have found that the ideas that stayed with me, the ones that truly mattered, did not require constant defense. They returned again and again, quietly, patiently, waiting for me to be ready rather than demanding immediate action. And when I finally moved on them, the movement felt natural, almost obvious. as if the path had been there all along. From the outside, people may call this luck. They may say you were in the right place at the right time. But from the inside, you know something else was at work. You know that you did not force the alignment. You recognized it. You did not chase the current. You stepped into it. This understanding brings relief, especially to those who have been taught that success requires constant struggle. It shows you that ease is not laziness, and that allowing is not a lack of ambition. It is a different relationship with effort, one that respects timing and trusts intelligence beyond the mind. When you stop pushing ideas, you give them room to breathe. You allow them to interact with the world rather than being trapped in your head. You let life participate in their unfolding. And life, when invited rather than coerced, often responds with surprising generosity. Ideas want to move. They want to connect. They want to become part of something larger than the individual who first sensed them. Your role is not to drag them forward, but to hold them with enough clarity and care that they can find the conditions they need to grow. When you do that, creation feels less like effort and more like conversation. You listen. You respond, you adjust, and in that rhythm, things come together not because you demanded they do so, but because they were finally allowed to. 10. You are not trapped in a life. You are tuned into a dimension. There is a belief that quietly shapes how many people endure their lives, and that belief is the idea that their current circumstances are a verdict, a final statement about who they are and what is possible for them. When something repeats long enough, struggle, disappointment, scarcity, emotional loneliness, it begins to feel permanent. Not because it is, but because familiarity masquerades as truth. Over time, people stop asking whether their life could move differently and start asking how to survive the version they believe they are stuck in. But what if your life is not a fixed sentence at all? What if it is more like a channel you have been tuned into, unconsciously and gradually, through patterns of belief, emotion, and reaction? When you look at reality this way, something loosens. The story changes from, "This is my fate," to "This is a stream I have been living in." And streams, unlike fate, can be left. There are dimensions of experience where life feels like constant resistance. In those dimensions, effort never seems to pay off in proportion to the energy invested. People work hard, care deeply, and still feel like they are swimming upstream. Relationships repeat the same painful themes, often with different faces but identical emotional outcomes. Money comes in only to disappear again. Rest feels undeserved. Joy feels temporary. This is not because the people living in these dimensions are flawed or unlucky. It is because they are tuned into a frequency shaped by survival, vigilance, and learned scarcity. In these dimensions, the nervous system is rarely at rest. Even in moments of calm, there is an underlying tension, a sense that something could go wrong at any moment. That tension subtly informs perception. Neutral events are interpreted as threats. Delays are seen as rejection. Challenges feel personal. From within this state, life does appear hostile or indifferent, because the system is meeting it from a place of contraction. But there are other dimensions of experience as well, and they coexist with the first ones. Not in some distant future, but right here, overlapping in the same physical world. In these dimensions, life still has challenges, but they do not feel punitive. Support arrives at meaningful moments. The right people appear when they are needed. Effort feels purposeful rather than draining. Even difficulty seems to carry guidance rather than punishment. There is a sense of being accompanied rather than abandoned by life. The difference between these dimensions is not moral worth, intelligence, or effort. It is alignment. It is the state from which life is being lived. You are not your circumstances. You are the state that is interacting with circumstances. And that state functions like a tuning mechanism, selecting which aspects of reality you experience most consistently. This is not mystical thinking. It is how systems behave. A radio does not create music. It selects a frequency, and depending on where it is tuned, an entirely different experience fills the room. Your beliefs act like coordinates, not the beliefs you recite, but the ones you live from, the assumptions you carry about safety, trust, worth, and possibility quietly tune you into certain streams of experience. Your emotional patterns reinforce those coordinates. If fear is familiar, you will notice more reasons to be afraid. If scarcity feels normal, abundance may pass unnoticed or feel suspicious. This is not because life is withholding, but because perception is selective. What makes this realization both painful and liberating is that it removes the comfort of blame without introducing the cruelty of self-judgment. You are not being punished by life. You are participating in a pattern that once made sense. Many of these patterns were formed early, often in environments where staying alert, working hard, or expecting disappointment was adaptive. They helped you survive. But survival strategies are not meant to define an entire lifetime. The idea that you are stuck usually arises when effort is applied within the same dimension repeatedly. You try harder, think more, analyze deeper, but nothing fundamentally shifts because the tuning itself has not changed. This is why insight alone often fails to produce transformation. You can understand the pattern intellectually and still remain inside it emotionally. Change happens when the state shifts, not just the story. Tuning into a different dimension does not require a dramatic external change. It rarely happens through force. It begins subtly, with awareness. You notice how your body responds to life. You notice the stories that arise automatically. You begin to see that your reactions are not inevitable truths, but habits of perception. This noticing creates space, and space is the doorway between dimensions. In that space, you have choice. Not the choice to instantly become someone else, but the choice to respond differently in small, consistent ways. To pause instead of react, to soften instead of brace, to question urgency instead of obeying it. Each of these choices sends a different signal into the field, and over time, that signal stabilizes. As the signal stabilizes, you begin to experience a different quality of life. Not because the world has suddenly changed, but because you are now interacting with it from a new state. The same events are interpreted differently. The same challenges are met with greater resilience. The same opportunities are recognized more quickly. This is what it means to move into a different dimension of experience. It is important to understand that dimensions are not places you travel to. They are modes of participation. You do not leave one life and enter another. You allow a different life to emerge from the same circumstances by changing how you meet them. This is why transformation often looks ordinary from the outside. The house may be the same, the job may be the same, but the experience of being alive within those conditions is radically different. I have known what it feels like to believe that life is something you endure, to wake up already tired, already anticipating struggle. In that state, hope feels dangerous because disappointment feels inevitable. And I have also known what it feels like when that state loosens, not all at once, but gradually, when effort gives way to trust, when control gives way to presence, when life stops feeling like a test and starts feeling like a conversation. The shift did not happen because my circumstances became perfect. It happened because I stopped interpreting difficulty as evidence that I was in the wrong place. I began to see challenges as movements within a larger flow, rather than barriers meant to stop me. That change in interpretation was not mental gymnastics. It was the natural result of a nervous system that had begun to feel safer. This is why safety is so central to changing dimensions. Only when the system feels safe does perception widen. Only then can you see beyond the familiar patterns. Only then can new possibilities register as real rather than theoretical. From safety, you can imagine a different life without immediately dismissing it as unrealistic. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not condemned to repeat the same story forever. You are simply tuned into a particular stream, and streams change when the conditions that sustain them change. Awareness changes conditions. Regulation changes conditions. Compassion changes conditions. Your current reality is not a judgment. It is feedback. It is showing you the state you have been living in. not to shame you, but to inform you. And information, when received without fear, becomes guidance. You do not need to leap into a new dimension overnight. You only need to begin listening to what your life is reflecting back to you. Notice what feels heavy. Notice what feels alive. Notice where you are pushing and where you are being carried. These observations are not trivial. They are signals. As you learn to respond to these signals with honesty rather than force, something begins to reorganize. The current shifts. The water feels different beneath you. And one day, without fanfare, you realize that life no longer feels like constant resistance. It feels responsive, supportive, alive. That is when you understand the truth beneath the struggle. You were never trapped in a life. You were tuned into a dimension, and dimensions, once recognized, can always be changed. 11. Shifting dimensions of reality. 3 simple steps that change everything. After all the ideas we've explored, after looking honestly at how entanglement, state of being, nervous system regulation, and perception shape our experience, there is a natural question that arises, especially for someone who has lived long enough to be tired of theories. The question is simple and sincere. How do I actually move out of the life I keep repeating and into something that feels more aligned, more supportive, more real? The answer is not complicated, but it does require sincerity, patience, and a willingness to stop fighting yourself. The process of shifting dimensions does not begin with changing your circumstances. It begins with changing how you meet them. And that change unfolds in 3 movements that are simple, but not superficial. They work because they address the level at which reality actually responds, which is not the surface of thought, but the depth of emotional and physiological state. The first step is recognition, and this step alone is often enough to disrupt patterns that have been running for years. Recognition means becoming aware of the reactions that repeat themselves in your life, especially the ones that feel automatic, justified, and familiar. These are the moments when something happens and your body responds before your mind has time to reflect. The tightness in the chest when money comes up, the defensiveness that arises in certain conversations, the quiet collapse when plans don't work out. These reactions are not random. They are rehearsed states. It is important to approach this step without judgment. You are not hunting for flaws. You are listening for patterns. When you notice that the same emotional response appears again and again across different situations, you are looking at a frequency, not a personality trait. That frequency has a history. It was learned. It served a purpose at some point, and it continues to shape your experience because it remains active, not because you are broken. Recognition brings distance without disconnection. You begin to see your reactions as signals rather than truths. Instead of saying, "This always happens to me," you begin to notice, "This is the state that shows up when this kind of situation arises." That subtle shift creates space, and space is where choice begins. The second step is recoding, which sounds technical, but is actually deeply human. Recoding does not mean lying to yourself or forcing positive thoughts on top of unresolved fear. It means gently introducing a new interpretation that opens possibility rather than closing it. When a reaction arises, it carries an implicit belief. Scarcity reactions carry beliefs about lack. Defensive reactions carry beliefs about threat. Hopeless reactions carry beliefs about inevitability. To recode is to ask, quietly and honestly, whether that belief is the only possible explanation, not whether it is wrong, but whether it is complete. From there, you offer your system a different option, one that does not deny reality, but relates to it differently. For example, instead of "nothing ever works out for me," the recode might be, "There is more happening here than I can see right now." Instead of "people always disappoint me," the recode might be, "I am learning to recognize and choose relationships that are more aligned with who I am becoming." These new beliefs are not meant to be chanted or defended. They are meant to be lived into slowly. Their purpose is not to convince the mind, but to invite the nervous system into a different orientation. When a belief opens possibility, the body responds differently. Tension softens slightly. Breath deepens. Attention widens. That physiological shift is what matters. Because the body does not respond to words alone. It responds to meaning. The third step is embodiment. And this is where real change becomes possible. Embodiment means allowing yourself, for a few minutes each day, to feel what it would be like to live from the new state rather than merely think about it. This is not visualization in the sense of imagining outcomes. It is emotional rehearsal. You allow your body to experience safety, ease, trust, or clarity as if they are already available. Not because you are pretending, but because these states are always accessible in small doses. Emotion is the signal. It is the language the field responds to most consistently. When you spend even a few minutes inhabiting a new emotional baseline, you are teaching your nervous system that another state is possible. Over time, the system begins to recognize that state as familiar. And familiarity is powerful. What feels familiar becomes home. What feels like home becomes the place you return to under stress. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. 5 minutes of genuine embodiment each day is more transformative than an hour of forced positivity once a week. The system learns through repetition, not through effort. As the new state stabilizes, it begins to broadcast differently, and the field, always responsive to coherence, reorganizes around that signal. This reorganization does not always look dramatic. Often, it shows up as small shifts that accumulate. A conversation goes better than expected. An opportunity arises without struggle. A situation that once triggered anxiety now feels manageable. These are not coincidences. They are feedback. They are signs that you are no longer entangled with the same current in the same way. It is important to be patient here. Shifting dimensions is not about escaping difficulty. It is about changing how difficulty is experienced. Old patterns may resurface, especially under stress. This does not mean the process is failing. It means the system is being tested, not punished. Each time you notice a reaction and return to awareness rather than self-criticism, you reinforce the new state. I want to speak directly to the part of you that may feel skeptical, tired, or guarded. If you have been through real pain, loss, or prolonged struggle, the idea that a few minutes of emotional embodiment could matter may feel insulting. I understand that resistance. I've felt it. But what these practices do is not erase the past. They change the present. And the present is the only place from which the future is shaped. You are not trying to become someone else. You are allowing yourself to experience life from a state that is less dominated by fear and more informed by presence. This is not a spiritual bypass. It is a return to regulation. When the nervous system is regulated, perception becomes accurate, choices become clearer, actions become more effective because they are not driven by panic. The field always responds to the most stable signal, not the loudest one, not the most dramatic one, the most stable one. This is why people who are grounded tend to experience life as more supportive, even when facing similar challenges. Their internal state is not constantly fluctuating, and that stability invites coherence from the environment. Over time, as your baseline shifts, you may notice that certain situations fall away. Some relationships may naturally loosen. Some goals may lose their urgency. Others may become clearer and more compelling. This is not loss. It is alignment. You are no longer trying to live in multiple dimensions at once. The beauty of this process is that it restores agency without burden. You are not responsible for controlling reality. You are responsible for tending to your state. That responsibility is manageable. It is humane. It honors the intelligence of both the system and the individual. If you remember nothing else, remember this reality does not require perfection. It responds to honesty. It responds to coherence. It responds to the quiet courage of someone willing to notice their patterns, question their assumptions, and allow themselves to feel differently, even for a moment. Those moments add up. They change the signal. And as the signal changes, the current shifts. Not because you forced it, but because you finally met life from a place where something new could emerge. Changing the channel, not changing who you are. If there is one thing I would want you to remember after everything we've explored together, it is this simple truth. You are not trapped in a version of reality, and you were never meant to become someone else in order to live a better life. What you experience as your life right now is not a fixed identity, not a sentence, and not a judgment. It is a channel you have been tuned into, often unconsciously, often for very understandable reasons. And channels can always be changed. So many people spend their lives trying to fix themselves because they believe something about them is fundamentally wrong. They try to improve their personality, override their emotions, silence their sensitivity, or harden themselves against disappointment. But this approach is built on a misunderstanding. The problem was never who you are. The problem was the state you learned to live in. And states can shift without you having to abandon yourself. You do not need to become more disciplined, more spiritual, more positive, or more impressive. You do not need to erase your past or rewrite your personality. You only need to stop confusing tension with safety and effort with worth. You only need to remember how to inhabit your life rather than brace against it. Changing the channel does not require force. Force belongs to the old way of living, the one shaped by survival and fear. Presence belongs to the new one. Presence is what happens when you stop trying to outrun the moment you are in. It is what happens when you allow yourself to feel your feet on the ground, your breath in your body, and your awareness right where you are, without immediately demanding that something be different. When you are present, your nervous system receives a signal it may not have felt in a long time that you are here, now, and not in immediate danger. This signal matters more than any thought you could think. It opens perception. It softens resistance. It restores access to intuition and discernment. And from that place, life begins to feel less like a problem to solve and more like a process you are participating in. Letting go is part of this shift, but not the kind of letting go that abandons responsibility or care. It is the letting go of constant self-surveillance, the letting go of the belief that you must manage every outcome to be safe. It is releasing the habit of tightening every time uncertainty appears. This kind of letting go feels unfamiliar at first, especially if vigilance once protected you. But it is deeply regulating. It tells the system that it can rest without falling apart. Allowing is the quiet companion to letting go. Allowing does not mean tolerating harm or denying truth. It means making space for what is already here so that it can move. When you allow your emotions instead of suppressing them, they complete their cycles more quickly. When you allow situations to unfold without prematurely controlling them, you gain access to timing and coordination you could never plan. Allowing is not passive, it is receptive. And receptivity is powerful because it keeps you in relationship with life, rather than in opposition to it. As your state changes, you may notice something subtle but profound. The same world begins to feel different, not because it has magically transformed overnight, but because you are meeting it from a different place. Challenges still arise, but they no longer feel like personal attacks. Delays still happen, but they do not immediately trigger collapse. Relationships still require effort, but the effort feels mutual rather than draining. This is what it means to change the channel without changing who you are. You may also notice that certain things naturally fall away. Old patterns lose their grip. Some dynamics no longer make sense. Some goals reveal themselves as outdated. This is not loss, it is clarification. When you shift frequency, you no longer resonate with what was built around an older state. That does not mean those things were wrong. It means you have moved. This movement does not require permission from anyone else. It does not require perfect conditions. It does not require certainty. It only requires honesty. Honesty about how your body feels. Honesty about what drains you. Honesty about what nourishes you. Honesty about where you are forcing and where you are flowing. These honest observations are not trivial. They are the signals that guide you toward a different channel. I want to speak to the part of you that may still be afraid to believe this. The part that worries that if you stop trying so hard, Everything will fall apart. That fear is understandable. It was shaped by real experiences. But effort has not protected you from pain, and control has not guaranteed safety. What has quietly sustained you, even in the darkest moments, is your capacity to adapt, to feel, and to continue. That capacity does not disappear when you soften. It becomes more accessible. The universe does not require you to struggle to earn your place in it. It does not reward exhaustion. It responds to coherence. When your inner state becomes more settled, more present, more aligned with truth rather than fear, life reorganizes in response, not because you commanded it to, but because you finally stopped interfering with the intelligence that was already there. This is not magic. It is mechanics. It is how interconnected systems behave. When the signal changes, the pattern changes. When the pattern changes, the experience changes. And the most stable signal you can offer is not effort or control, but presence. Presence is steady. Presence is honest. Presence does not pretend. You do not need to wait until you are healed to live this way. You live this way in order to heal. Healing is not a destination you reach before you are allowed peace. It is what happens when peace becomes part of how you live. Even imperfectly, even inconsistently, even in small moments. If you take anything with you from this conversation, let it be this: you are not behind, and you are not broken. You have been living in a particular frequency because it once made sense. Now, something in you is ready for a different experience. That readiness is enough. Change does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with a quiet sense of rightness, a feeling of being less at war with yourself, a recognition that you do not need to push so hard to be carried forward. And when you feel that, even briefly, you will know you have changed the channel. Not because you became someone new, but because you finally allowed yourself to be here, as you are, in a state where life can meet you differently,